What's going on, YouTube? This is the NCU podcast. I am your host, Noel, and today we have another movie review. This time we're reviewing Transformers Rise of the Beast. By the time of this recording, I just got home and after finishing the movie, and I want to let go of let my thoughts out, especially because this is from the last video, which you can check in the top post on the top of this video. I reviewed Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, and I said at the end of that video that this was the second most anticipated movie that I had this year. Considering we aren't in the Michael Bay universe anymore, I thought, okay, hopefully, I had so much hope for this movie. And no, that's not me saying that this movie disappointed, but I'm going to get into my full review, I guess, more so of the pros and cons. I'm going to try to make this one a little bit shorter. I know my last one was really kind of a retelling of the whole movie, and I want to actually give you guys, positives and negatives instead of just, hey, let me tell you everything that happened in the movie. That'll probably make things better. Also, for this, spoilers ahead. But before we get into it, if you guys don't mind, please liking the video, subscribing to the page, and hitting the notification bell, sharing this with your friends. But without further ado, let's get started. So, growing up, I was always a Transformers fan. I was a Transformers fan, and I was more of a DC fan than I was a Marvel fan. As much as I love Spider-Man and Wolverine and the rest of the Marvel cast, of course, X-Men, Avengers, things like that, I more so lean towards DC. I got more DC comics than I did Marvel comics, as well as I just watched more DC animated shows like Justice League, Unlimited. You had Batman Beyond, Batman the animated series. I watched a lot of those. And on top of that, especially with my uncle, he got me into Transformers, specifically the G1 versions of Transformers. And I was hooked. I got Transformers figures, I got Transformers toys, and something that I always, kept up with and had a love for. And I was very surprised that they actually went with the Beast Wars. Well, more so, they went with the Maximals and the Terracons in this. Definitely a more of a surprise. You really don't hear too much about them unless you know somebody who's really into the Transformers universe. And yeah, so this movie overall, I feel like this movie was good. Like, it was definitely a a breath of fresh air, considering the rest of the Michael Bay universe, which that was really hit or miss. But nevertheless, this movie was very entertaining. It was very good. It had you with a couple of laughs here, had you with some shocker moments here, and overall it was good. But not before, while I'm telling everybody that this movie is good, let's get into the actual pros and cons of the movie. So, as always, you want to hear about the good. People always want to hear about the good. So let's start off with the good. I thoroughly enjoyed the voice acting, especially because there's a lot of voice actors in here that I did not realize. For example, the voice actor for Mirage that you see mostly in the trailer, he was the Silver Porsche, it's voice acted by Pete Davidson. That was a major shock to me. I did not realize that Scourge, the main antagonist of the movie, was voice acted by Peter Dinklage. That definitely had me for a loop. Of course, Peter Cullen being Peter Cullen's always top tier Optimus Prime voice lines. And I believe it's Michelle Yeoh. I'm sorry if you ever see this and I pronounce your last name wrong. But even her voice acting for Air Razor, I never expected that. And I feel like I didn't, mostly because I didn't go into like looking into the cast much. And with some people, you weren't 100% able to tell, considering with them being robots, there is some type of voice editing for them. But nevertheless, the voice acting and everything was good. Visuals was very great, especially for those who enjoy G1 Transformers. Like, this isn't the big bulky Transformers that we've seen in the Michael Bay universe. This is more of how they are from the original showings of Transformers. So you have the more slimmer bodies, you have the more human-esque faces, and that's something that I thoroughly enjoy. It was a major nostalgia point for me. So, yeah, the G1 versions of them, especially Optimus Prime, you also get a lot of actually transforming in this movie. Like, when it came to the Michael Bay films, and by the way, I'm not going to just crap on the Michael Bay films. At some point, I feel like I might do a video based on just the Michael Bay films, but that may be for a later date. Please let me know if that's something you will be interested in seeing. But at some point, when it came to the Michael Bay films, especially later on, there weren't as many just straight transformations. Like, you've seen, of course, they transform, but it would either see them as a vehicle and then quickly transform, versus, or you would just see them as a vehicle and then it'll cut away and then it'll come back and then they're in their robot form. This one, you've seen them just straight up transforming. Like, you've seen every mechanism moving, even if it was a situation where they were about to be in the midst of battle. You've seen a lot of them sit back and actually like drift away and start transforming and then getting up. You had some quick transformations, which I was like, that's okay. But you still, of course, seen the actual transformations, which I thoroughly enjoyed. A second pro, which was shown in the second trailer, I enjoyed seeing Unicron. After watching Transformers the last night and Unicron being hinted at and saying, oh, Unicron is really Earth and all of this other stuff, I was frustrated. I was really frustrated because, again, especially from watching G1 Transformers and seeing Transformers the animated movie and seeing this giant transforming planet that's really taking over, like trying to take over the universe, and then just to have it where it's like, oh, in Transformers the last night, you had it where they said Unicron was Earth. I knew that it wasn't going to be a situation where we ever seen an actually transforming planet. With making Unicron Earth, they basically put it to where if they would have continued with the Michael Bay universe, they would have sat back and they would have kind of done what they did in Guardians of the Galaxy 2, where Unicron would have kind of just basically had to make an Avatar-esque body rather than actually transforming. In Rise of the Beast, though Unicron did not transform, he was an actual giant robotic planet that we've seen floating around in space. And it, again, for the G1 lovers, this hit nostalgia. Unicron was beautiful. Yes, we did not see him actually transform, but we seen him take the same devastation that he did in Transformers the animated movie. And that was something I thoroughly enjoyed. Fight scenes I enjoyed. I enjoyed that mostly because it wasn't too many cuts and it wasn't too many unnecessary explosions. Like, it got to the point where if, Scourge or Optimus or Bumblebee, they shot an actual missile towards somebody, if the missile didn't hit like the actual, intended target, it would hit behind them and you would see that, oh, it missed. Rather than it just being like, oh, well, I shot, one bullet, it missed, but then like 4 explosions go off in the background. It wasn't all of that. The energy cannons and everything stayed within, accuracy and not just being over the top for the sake of being over the top. I also thought that, which was interesting, a lot of the Transformers seemed a little bit small, which I found kind of like funny because though, Mirage was a Porsche and, the Porsche isn't necessarily that big, it's probably because of, growing up and watching the Michael Bay, Transformers, I just kind of thought a lot of them would be a lot bigger, but a lot of them were not too tall. And I was like, it's kind of funny, but nevertheless, it is what it is. Again, the fight scenes were really great, especially the last battle. It wasn't a bunch of, again, unnecessary explosion or unnecessary cuts. It was just straight. You see the fights and everything. Of course, they had, as Hollywood and more so big action films tend to do, you had the little nameless minions that, run around, scurry around. They don't do too much. They're just there to just, pop up and get destroyed so that the other side characters have something to fight rather than just, nobody. So, nevertheless, it wasn't too many cuts. It was actually just straight action, especially the final fight. You seen a lot of like flowing action. Kind of think about it more so if you've seen the Avengers, like when they all fight together. It's kind of like you'll focus on one character and then it pans over to another as they're all fighting. So again, something I thoroughly enjoyed. I also enjoyed the fact that they kept the human characters more so human. The one bad critique that especially a lot of people have said when it came to Michael Bay's Transformers is that at some point the humans got a little too much of, the big ending, the big we take down the villain rather than it being, actually a Transformers movie. Made no sense why in Transformers the last night we had Mark Wahlberg literally get what was I believe the sword of King Arthur and stop another Transformer from beheading Optimus. A human getting strength like that. I can't remember the female character in the last night, but literally she held the staff of Merlin and was supposed to be the only one to be able to stop Cybertron from actually colliding with Earth. Like that makes absolutely no sense. Or even in Transformers 2, which was Transformers 2 was a personal favorite of mine growing up, but that's for completely other reasons outside of the story. You had it where that the matrix of leadership crumbled into dust. Sam Witwicky is about to die, and he goes to Transformers Heaven, and they reform the Matrix. It made no sense. This was more so, okay, we're humans. We're here to do human things, and that's about it. We're not doing anything crazy until I would say the final fight where you had Mirage give, what's his name? Noah? Yes, Noah, the main character of the actual movie, the main human character of the actual movie, or the male main human character. You seen him give him part of his, body to be able to like have like a Transformer-esque human suit. And even with that, he wasn't doing too much, or he was more so being a pest to the actual Transformers, at least the Terracons, rather than actually, I'm doing major damage. Like, he sat there, he was taking out like a lot of the, no named little random minions that were scuttling around. He was able to just stab Scourge in the back of the leg and it made him fall over, but he was still fighting Optimus on strength. He didn't do too much, which I was like, cool. We don't need the humans. These are Transformers giant mechs. We don't need it to be a situation where the U.S. Army is coming in and they're able to blow up and take down every Transformer because you then, take the validity away from them actually being giant robots and actually being threats. They're just saying, oh, this is just another inconvenience that the military can handle. I also would say that I enjoyed the fact that the cast was smaller, and I'm more so speaking on the Transformer aspect of it. We had Optimus, RC, which love seeing RC actually, in live action. But we had Optimus, RC, we had Bumblebee, and Mirage. Those were the four main Autobots that were shown. You then had Rhinox, you had Cheetor, you had Air Razor, there we go, and we had Optimus Primal, four main Maximals. And then we had three Terracons. which was Scourge. We had Nightbird, and I cannot remember the last one. I just know it was. Dang, I cannot remember the last one. He just seemed like a brute, and I'm kind of frustrated. I can't remember his name, but nevertheless, the cast was small, so you don't have just robots just randomly nowhere not getting screen time. Each villain and each hero ended up getting, to me, proper screen time, so that you didn't have the film feeling like very, very bloated. And it was something that I, again, liked and respected. I enjoyed Wheeljack being in there. Wheeljack is not a robot we talk about, well, not a transformer we talk about too much. Didn't expect to see Stratosphere. That was like, that's a really kind of lesser name, but nevertheless, it was still really, really great. Were there any other things that I had positive to say? Because I don't have too many negatives, except for, well, I do have some negatives, but nevertheless, that's what I would say. Unless I come up with find something else randomly, I'm trying to remember. That's what I'll say is my positives for Rise of the Beast. Now my negatives. Um, I felt like the CGI was good. The CGI was actually good, but I feel like also there were some moments, especially when some of them, like Optimus was standing still, it kind of looked a little janky in certain areas, especially around his mouth. Like, instead of him having, I guess since we were talking about when I was bringing up them being more friendly to G1, instead of him having just, the shield around his mouth, they actually show him, with a mouth, and he used the shield as just kind of like, a face mask for being in battle mode. But some of the CGI around his mouth and everything seemed a little janky, and I was like, I was able to notice it. Wasn't really too big on it, but it was a small nitpick. They did have a couple of moments of, humans being humans, and I say that as in, you had, I believe it was Optimus, Primal, and Air Razor. They ended up getting into a fight, and what made it frustrating is that the female lead, Elena, she ended up basically kind of being too near them. She didn't end up actually, dying or anything, but it was the same of, oh, there's a gunfire and the humans are trying to kind of like run through it. It's like, you don't need to do that, because all you do is put yourself in danger for absolutely no reason. It Stuff like that gets kind of frustrating because it kind of takes away from the actual battle. It just makes it seem like, oh, I can't believe I randomly waltzed over here, and it's like, no, you need to move. Like, please get out of there. Another small nitpick I would say I had is that even with the Noah end up getting a part of Mirage to have a Transformer S suit, like human size Transformer S suit, it got to a point where he, like, Optimus Prime was getting taken away, like more so like pulled in the air, and Noah ended up catching him. And I'm like, no, just no. It was one of those, I get it, it's a fictional movie, oh, it's Transformers, but it's like, no, it was something I was kind of like, per se, a little nitpicky about, because I'm like, really? Like, as much as you have a Transformer suit, you're a human catching another giant truck. And not only was it that, is that he caught him as he was being pulled into the air. Like, as if like there was a vacuum in the air. I'm not gonna actually spoil the end, but it was like, let's just say there was a vacuum per se in the air that was pulling a lot of the ground up. Well, Unicron, that's not really a spoiler, but, well, it's a spoiler, but I'm not telling you why it happened. But when it came to Unicron, he was pulling a lot of the earth up, and he got caught, and Optimus got caught in actually being pulled up, and he was caught by a human. He wasn't pulled in by a human, but he was still caught by him, which it just had me like, no, just, it was it was not believable. Not even just because of the Transformer suit. and him trying to hold an actual transformer, but more so you're holding an actual robot and they're still being pulled away, which means you're being pulled even more, but you were still able to hold your ground. It just didn't make sense to me. And also, I would say some of the lines fell a little flat, like some of the line deliveries per se fell a little flat. And that's, to me, I was like, maybe you may feel different. Again, I'm giving my opinion, but some of the lines that were delivered fell flat for me, and I was like, could have been better. It felt like some of them they were just reading straight from the script, and I was like, not the biggest fan of. But also another good thing that I almost forgot to bring up is that Scourge, Peter Dinklage's Scourge, was actually a good villain. Like, especially when I seen Unicron being teased in the trailer and shown in the trailer, I thought Scourge was gonna be kind of mediocre, just a little throwaway per se. But nevertheless, Scourge is actually a good villain. Scourge actually was taking out a lot of the Transformers and more so a lot of the Autobots. And I would say some of the Maximals. But nevertheless, he actually showed that, hey, I am a threat. And I feel like that was a good thing outside of just having a good villain. But I also felt like it was good because with a smaller cast, you are able to make the stakes feel higher. Because if there were like 10 Autobots and like 40 different, like, or 40, well, I'm gonna say not gonna say 40, 20 different Terracons, you would have had it to where a lot of the Terracons would have just gotten wiped out easily. And then any of the Autobots that would have died, we wouldn't have actually had a close connection with them. So having very minimal Autobots, but then still having it to where if any one of them gets defeated, it really puts like a big damper and seismic hole. It was really done well. And I think final good point that I will say that I said I knew I was gonna have some other good points that I forgot to mention. I felt like they, with this movie, especially with Optimus Prime's character, I felt they were going based off of how they did in the Netflix series, which, if you haven't seen the animated Netflix series, I highly recommend it. I believe it's called Transformers Siege. But nevertheless, with this Optimus Prime, because this is a reboot, this is not a part of the Michael Bay universe, it's not taken back in time to the Michael Bay universe. This is a complete and utter reboot. But with this version of Optimus Prime, this is at least after the Bumblebee movie. But he is literally sitting there feeling devastated and hurt, and he's feeling like the weight of being a Prime, but also the weight of being a leader. And it has it so that he kind of has some very, very, I wouldn't say irrational moments, but kind of more emotional moments. He seems more angry in this movie. And not angry in a bad way, but more so angry in, like a guilt way. Like anytime they fail, he feels like he's taking the whole burden of their failure. And all he's trying to do is just get them back home. Because obviously we've seen that he was able to get a lot of them off of Cybertron in the beginning of the Bumblebee movie. But we also realize, he was actually taking on like a lot of the other Decepticons. Which, by the way, there is no Decepticon tease or no Decepticons being brought up in this movie. It's just literally the Autobots, the Terracons, the Maximals, and Unicron. You're not going to see a Megatron or a Shockwave or a Starscream. Nevertheless, I was always able to connect with Optimus, just understand him being a leader and everything. But he did have moments where he felt like he could not, of course, trust humans, but he also did not feel like he could sit back and actually fully trust himself. He felt, I have to do this, I have to do this. And sometimes if his plan failed, he would really sit there and like take that burden and hold and bear that weight. And I was like, I enjoy this. Especially because, again, in the Siege show on Netflix, he was able to kind of do the same thing where he did not know if he was like the best choice for a leader. And he was like, of course, everybody's going to follow Optimus, but we were all able to see, he feels like he failed, by leaving the war in Cybertron and leaving Cybertron in ruins. And he failed by getting them on Earth and stranded on Earth with no way back. And of course, you can say, well, at some point, the rest of the Autobots or Decepticons or somebody will pull back and they'll, get to Earth so they can possibly go back to Cybertron. Which, none of that was teased or anything, but, it's wishful thinking. But at some point, he was able to go from, okay, I don't know how to feel about these humans, to, okay, we need to actually protect them. And at some point, we're going to get back to Cybertron, which I enjoyed. And that's mostly it for my review on the pros and cons. Another, spoiler, another spoiler is that I definitely didn't expect with the end of this movie is that there was a G.I. Joe tease. Like, literally, Noah's handed a card, you see a laboratory in the back, and when he flips the card, it says G.I. Joe. For those that are sitting there saying, oh my gosh, that's just so random. First off, Hasbro owns G.I. Joe and owns Transformers. It's not too crazy. But secondly, when it comes to the comic books, the Transformers and the G.I. Joe have crossed over a few times. And I think few is just kind of like not even that much of a stretch, probably multiple times. So this was one of those things where I got just a major shock out of it. I wasn't expecting anything like that. Like, oh, we have this, we have that. I'm like, okay, maybe we're going to, see, especially when the agent is talking to Noah, I'm sitting there thinking, okay, there's going to be something else dealing with the Transformers. There was other Transformers here beforehand. And I was like, please don't go that route. But seeing the G.I. Joe, at least the G.I. Joe card, was very, very funny. Now, do we know if this is going to be a G.I. Joe complete reboot? No one knows. We don't know if we're going to see The Rock coming back on his role in G.I. Joe, especially with him being back in Fast and Furious. Nevertheless, it was very, very eye-opening, shocking, and yeah, it definitely will have you at the edge of your seat once you have, because you're gonna start asking yourself questions. Nevertheless, I feel like this was a really, really good movie, and just like Bumblebee, I felt like this was a breath of fresh air and a fresh start. This movie did its job while also setting up key points to where you can continue on with the story and have further films. And I feel like no character was actually wasted, except Rhinox. Rhinox should have got voice lines. He didn't really have voice lines at all, or he didn't really say much at all. But nevertheless, I felt like for those who are Transformers fans that are a little hesitant on whether they should see this movie or not, I say go for it. This was a really good movie. It is a movie that will hit nostalgia buttons, as well as, bring other things from comics and in lore that will actually make you sit back and say, all right, cool, this is where we're going. This is the direction we're going. And yeah, I hope everybody does go see it. I hope everybody enjoys this NCU review. Next week, I believe we have The Flash, so please stay tuned into that. But that is all for this video, ladies and gentlemen. If you guys please do not mind hitting that like button, hitting the share button, and subscribing to this page, and also turn on that notification bell. But without further ado, thank you all for listening, and I'll see you all on the next one.